Sana'a is reputed to be the first city in the world to be rebuilt after the floods. The people who roam its narrow, dusty streets have lived for centuries in deep-frozen barbarity, which has only occasionally been disturbed by the probing of the outside world. Sana'a looks today much as it must have done in biblical times. Since I was in Sana'a, the deposed Imam Bada, whom the rebels hoped was dead, has reappeared over 100 miles from here at the head of an army of loyal tribesmen in the north of the Yemen, and he's promised to win back his feudal kingdom from the leader of the revolution, Brigadier Salal. Every man who can afford a rifle carries it as a prized possession, and it's the support of these men that Salal needs for his new regime. The old Imam kept the tribes subdued by the classical method of taking hostages against their good behavior. Many of the tribesmen seem to me to have come into Sana'a just to see what was happening. They spend much of the day chewing a mild narcotic called khat, which distends their cheeks like a ping-pong ball. Yemen is incredibly poor, and its economy is based entirely on agriculture. Everything is done by the most primitive methods. Donkeys, for instance, are still used for threshing. It would be a problem for any government to bring the Yemen into the 18th century, let alone the 20th. Outward signs of the revolution are few, until you look more closely, for instance, at this picturesque camel train. The boxes are ammunition, stamped Imam in English, and they're being carried into an arsenal now controlled by the Republicans. The revolution began at midnight on September the 26th. During the 8 days of his reign, the new Imam Bada had released the tribal hostages, freed political prisoners, and appointed Salal his commander-in-chief. This policy of appeasement proved fatally misguided. Walking through the ruins of his damaged palace, I heard the story of the revolution from the new government's spokesman. In the center of Sana'a there's a square which dominates much of the city, and at midnight 6 Russian-built tanks of the Yemeni army moved in from their barracks outside the city wall. 3 stayed in the square and 3 surrounded the palace. The Imam was telephoned and asked to surrender. He refused, and the tanks began shelling the palace. The Imam fought back until dawn, when he left through a small side door, normally used by the women. It doesn't say much for the revolutionaries, as there are only, as far as I could see, 3 ways out of the palace in all. The revolutionaries pursued the Imam for 22 days, until they lost track of him in the north. When he'd gone, the public were allowed into the palace to loot.